Well, just to kind of give you a synopsis on how we plan the year, the pastors like to get together twice a year. So last January and June, we meet to prepare the whole year, both what we're going to do with regards to outreach, instruction, but also preaching. So last June, we sat and said, what do we want to teach in the year 2025? And I said, I want to preach a book, but the problem is, I've preached on it before. I preached on it back in 2006, and I don't like to preach the same book twice. And they said, that's almost 20 years ago. But I think about it, it feels like yesterday. So they said, what book do you want to preach on? I said, well, it's one of my favorites. And again, we've already preached on it. They said, well, just tell me what the book is. I said, well, it's the book of Romans. They all said, oh, we love the book of Romans. So we're going to decide to begin preaching Romans in the month of February. But we just did Ephesians, and you can't have two New Testament books side by side. It just doesn't work. So we're going to put in this month some Old Testament for you. And they said, well, what do we do in the Old Testament for just a month? And I'm not sure if it was Chris Paoni or Trevor. They said, let's talk about the law. Let's go to Moses and talk about the law. And I said, I don't want to talk about the law. They said, but we need to talk about the law. Romans talks all about the law, and it would be good for us to study the law. But the law for me feels heavy and boring and dreadful and terrible. So I sat and I said, all right, how about this? How about if we kind of look at it like we're going to go up to Mount Sinai, and we're going to understand why the law was given and just take 4 weeks, kind of like we're spending a month where Moses did, and learn the law. And then I started reading the book of Romans. Do you know the law is talked about over 50 times in the book of Romans? And so I'm thinking through it saying, you know what? It would really be a good thing for us to understand and not have the same reaction I had to the law, where the law is truly a gift to us from God. It's grace. It's His grace. But it has to be understood correctly and in context of how it's given. And so here's what we're going to do. To traverse up Sinai. Sinai is the mountain where Moses got the 10 Commandments. We're going to take a 4-week study to traverse and walk up the mountain. This week we're just going to deal with this issue of when we say law, what is meant by the law? Because I think we're confused. I think that's the problem. We don't understand what we're talking about when we talk about the law. And more importantly, is the law good or is it a bad thing? Second thing, next week we're going to talk about, does the law save? Is it salvific? Like these ladders, does it bring us up to heaven? Like the stairway into God's presence? If I just climb and climb more, can I get there on my own? That's next week. The third one is the law has a purpose, really to do more than anything, reveal what's inside of me. Because I'm fickle. I'm a broken person. And when He gave the law, there was a scenario that was so obvious, and it's still happening today. And then the fourth week, we're going to talk about these 2 mountains. Hebrews talks about there's Mount Sinai, but then there's Mount Zion. And we are the people of Mount Zion. It's a better mountain, and that's what the last week is. So to jump in, we're going to deal with the first one, what is the law, and is it good? And I bring that up because intrinsically, in our guts, we think law is bad. 10 Commandments, bad. Deuteronomy, I don't even like to say the word. Leviticus, who here wants to read the book of Leviticus? Only Chris Paoni. He's weird. Don't listen to him. So law by nature is bad. And I think what we do is we look for evidence because really we don't want to be under any authority. Ever since Adam, we don't want to be told what to do. Don't eat that fruit. Why not? Looks good to me. And so by nature we have this aversion to the law. And so we look for what I would say confirmation bias why the law is bad. If you look around our culture, modern opinion, we're American. Don't tread on me. Ever since the Boston Tea Party, we want to be free and independent. And any kind of law, especially from a king, seems oppressive. Whoa, they're telling me what to do. Restrictive. They're not letting me be my full self. repressive. They want to keep me back in the past. And so the law, to most people, is soul-killing, in modern opinion. If you look scripturally, it's a theological conundrum. There's confusion around it. Romans chapter 10, verse 4 said Jesus is the end of the law. That sounds like he came to finish something that isn't good. So if he's the end of the law, is the law actually good? And what does that even mean? And then you have this statement in the New Testament, which is, we are no longer under the law, but grace. And so with all of these things raging against the Christian, there is this desire by most to just scuttle the law, just to have nothing to do with it, to live and let live. And like Lady Gaga says, hey, I was born this way, so get off my back. But the problem is definition of terms, as it usually is. If you want to know any hint about Satan, what he does is he makes things confusing and he tries to give us different definitions. So we have to ask the first question, when we say law, what do we mean? What do we mean by the law? Because I'll tell you, when I hear law, instantly I just think burden. But actually it was meant to be a blessing. So the first definition of law is, it just means a witness from prophets, from basically the men God sent to reveal the person of God and his will. We call that the Old Testament. The Old Testament means a written testimony, a written history of God. And it invites us in to know him by meditating and reading on it. So it's actually a gift. Luke 24:44 is talking about, Jesus is talking to the law as basically the first 5 books of Moses. So it can be the whole Old Testament, as Matthew 5:17 says, or it can be just first 5 books of Moses. Both use the word law. And it's the express will of God that's been revealed to us by Moses and the prophets to invite us in to be blessed. So it's a blessing. The law is a blessing. However, there's a second way to interpret the law. And it's usually said in Galatians and Romans as works of the law. It's not just the law, but how you use the law. John Piper says it's a distorted application of the law, a twisting of Moses' commands, which we call legalism. It turns the commandments, Piper says, into a job description for how to earn the wages of salvation. So works of the law. Meaning it's appealing to our pride, and it gives us a way that we think we can strive, work, climb ladders to reach God on our own. And we really don't want God. We just want to be told how to get to heaven. And God, leave us alone. Just tell me what to do. That is why we have ladders, because a lot of people think there's ways to get up to heaven, and all you got to do is follow them, and you'll be just fine. But it becomes a burden. It becomes exhausting, and that becomes soul-killing. And that's why most of us hate the law, because we see it in second definition. I think Satan also takes this definition to divide us. I think that's why he warps it and distorts it and perverts it, because he makes it a competition. It seems like the people who climb more ladders are better. People who work harder must be godlier. They're sold out. We like to use the word, he's on fire. How can you tell he's on fire? Because he's climbing so many ladders. But we fail to see this is Satan's scheme to divide and conquer. He's using it as a weapon to get the churches to compete. So we've turned the law into moral competition, and we have a modern parlance for this. It's called religion. Religion is notorious for dividing people, as John Piper said, to distort the intention of the law. Jesus told this parable. It's in the book of Luke, chapter 18, 11 through 12. He wants the disciple to notice this Pharisee. This Pharisee's at the temple. This Pharisee's really holy. He's got his garments on. And Jesus says, look at the Pharisee. Look how he stands by himself and prays. And his prayer goes like this: God, I thank you I'm not like other people. Robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. It's a ladder. Even look up to heaven because I give a tenth of all that I get. But the tax collector just beat his breast, looked down to the ground, and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. This is religion. It's competition. And Jesus says, the first guy's wrong, the second guy is right. It's all about standing before a holy God, needing Him. So this goes into my A slide. I'm just going to give you the definition, give you a little categorization, but let's talk about it honestly. A slide is when I just talk to you about what I know and what I've seen. It's funny, I was reading a journal before service this morning. I was installed in 2004 of this date as pastor of this church. That was a long time ago, and it feels like yesterday. And sometimes I feel like I just started and I don't have any room to say anything, but I've seen a lot in 20 years, and I've seen a lot of religion, a lot of it. Actually, I grew up in a church culture that used the law as a way to keep people in line. You better do this or else. I was always made to feel like I had to climb and climb more and climb more and climb more and climb more. And if I didn't keep climbing, I was in trouble and God was mad at me. So I had to go to church. I had to dress up in thick, itchy sweaters. I had to always look good going to church, and man, they'd scratch. I had to fast during Lent. I couldn't eat meat on Fridays. I had to say the rosary when my grandfather was over. I was the youngest. I told you a story before. I was the youngest, so my grandfather and grandmother would stay over 2-3 weeks at a time, and my siblings would always leave the house early because they knew if you're around, you got to sit on the couch and say the rosary with Grandpa. Oh, it's like death. It's almost like the worse it was, the holier you were. Very weird. I had to be an altar boy to look better than the other religious slackers, like Ted Wagner, who'd throw spitballs at the girls at church. I had to be bored at church. I had to be serious. I couldn't smile. I always sat next to my grandma. If I smiled, she'd backhand me. You can't enjoy church. Don't you understand? God is here. I had to recite my bedtime prayers every night. And I learned to do them real fast. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, ever this day be at my side, to light, to guard, to rule, to guide. Amen. Good night, Jesus. Or, time for dinner. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. I said my prayers. I'm a good boy. But all those are ladders, and more ladders, and more ladders. I was climbing Mount Sinai. And the moment I stopped, I could feel God's anger and condemnation. I was a bad boy. Good and bad. And then I was also made to believe, I watched a lot. I was made to believe that those priests and nuns were closer to God because of how they dressed. I mean, nobody just normally dressed like that. So they dressed like that because they must have really known God. And the way they talked about God was much more, like instead of saying God, they said God. And instead of saying pray, they'd say, let us pray. And I started to realize, do you know what? This is all a show. It's a show. In fact, it reminds me of Matthew 23. It's called hypocrisy. Jesus said everything they do is for people to see. And a lot of people will climb ladders so you think we're good. And actually, we climb ladders to make ourselves feel good. It's play acting. And a lot of people play act. And then, what happened, I got hired by a Baptist church. And I thought I'd be set free from play acting. They have their own ladders. Wow, I learned the unspoken codes you cannot do. No drinking, no dancing, And especially back in the 70s and 80s, no rock and roll. You had to wear ties to church. Men wore these things that would cause you to barely be able to breathe, but it meant you're holy. And women wore dresses. I remember my wife, I was talking to her about lipstick. She'd go to a church where women could not wear red lipstick. You know why you don't wear red lipstick? We can't talk about that. Women are called a W word when they wear No movies. Especially if you go to an R movie, you can almost feel the tongue of fire from hell lapping you on your foot. You can almost feel it. It's a game. It's a religious game. Which leads us to the second question. And it's just natural, because if you play this game enough, you get tired and you don't meet God and you get exhausted. So then you ask, is the law really good? If the law can be twisted and contorted, if it can be used to compete and compare and even condemn, can it ever be a good thing? Or maybe let's just trash it, because that would be better for all of us, so we could live in this really cool term, an authentic life. I want to be authentic. Be myself. Wouldn't that be the best way to avoid law as a burden? I just want to live a blessed life. Next week, we're going to go into history of how we got the law, where the law came from, what was the context. But today, we're just asking this question. This is all we're asking. Is the law good? Because you need to first have a foundation. If you think there's any level of you think it's bad, you're not going to want to know it. But if it's good, it changes everything. So is the law good? I want you to go to the book of Deuteronomy, 5th book in the Bible. Deuteronomy means the second giving of the law. Moses gathered everybody together, Israel, before they're going to Promised Land, and he recited their history and why God gave the law, why he brought Moses to Mount Sinai. I want you to go to chapter 4. I still have one verse for you, actually two, 39 and 40. And before we read it, I'm going to put it up here on the screen. I want you to ask yourself, is the law good or bad? That's my only question. So let's read it. This is Deuteronomy 4:40. Keep his decrees, he's talking to Israel, keep his decrees and commands, which I'm giving you today, which is the 10 Commandments, the Levitical codes, that come from Exodus, talks about how the Levites are to act, all of that stuff, the Ark of the Covenant. I'm giving you these today so that, this word is a word of intent, so that is intention. This is God's intention. What is he trying to accomplish? So that it may go well with you and your children after you, and that you may live long in the land the Lord your God gives you for all time. So that is the key phrase, and the intent is three things. And tell me if these are good things. God gives the law so that it may go well with you. That's a pretty good deal. I'm giving you this law so that you'll have a good life. That's called blessing. Secondly, I'm giving you this so your children will have a good life. That's not bad. Who doesn't want to have a good life for their kids? I do. And the third one, I'm giving you this law so that you may live long in the land, meaning you may have a blessed, long life. Each of these phrases is meant to enforce the idea that God's ways are good. He loves his people and he cares for them. And I would say all of us want this. I want this. So the question is, why would we want to get rid of a good thing? Because a lot of people do. Christ is the end of the law. We don't need it anymore. We don't need that. So that's subtly saying it's a bad thing, but God says it's a good thing. So how do we understand this? I want to practically talk through this a second. Rules, laws, commands are always good when they come from a loving parent. Always. If a parent really loves his kids, they will naturally give rules, laws, and commands for two reasons. Rules and laws, they protect the child from evil that lurks outside and within. I'll say that again. They protect people from evil. Evil lurks outside and from within. That's why Jesus said, "Protect us, Lord, from evil." That's the Lord's Prayer. And the second thing is they're like guardrails that provide a path where I can be free. I was talking to Chris Bayoni. He told me they did this study. Is that a schoolyard? Was it a schoolyard? And the schoolyard had a fence. And was it busy roads around it or something? They had roads around it? Just property. And they had this fence. And they said, oh, we need to let the kids be free, so let's take it down the fence. So when they took down the fence, the kids, rather than being more free, they huddled together because they were scared where the boundaries were. But once you put the fence, they live so much more free. That's the point. Protects and provides a path. So let me show you even a better illustration. Pictured here is, this right here is, and I'll say it in Spanish because it sounds a lot more ominous when you say it in Spanish. This is the Camino de la Muerte. Whoa! Camino de la Muerte. Which means, my brother was actually a missionary here in Bolivia. It's called the Road of Death. It's the Road of Death. It is considered the most dangerous road in the world. It's about 50 miles. It goes from the rainforest to La Paz, Bolivia. It reaches up to 11,500 feet. The cliffs are steep, sometimes plummeting almost 2,000 feet down. So that truck drives off, down into the valley. Very, very steep. What also makes it dangerous is it's almost impossible to pass because the lanes are very narrow. There's a lot of fog and landslides. But here's the kicker. It was built without guardrails. There's no guardrails. They're trying to put them in, but it's just, could you imagine trying to put a guardrail there? It's built without guardrails. So here's the problem. Per year, it averages 209 accidents and 96 deaths per year. Who would like to ride that? Not me. My brother's a missionary there, and he went on a bike over there. I go, Don, you are crazy. He goes, I love it. Almost every turn, you almost die. I'm like, oh, my brother's weird. Spike, he's kind of like you a little bit, you know. I understand. So much fun, you never know. Every moment you could die. However, like the law, it's meant to keep people from making choices that will send them over the cliff. That's why Jesus said when you ignore law, one prophet said, if you ignore his law, you are sowing to the wind. And when you sow to the wind, you know what you reap? The whirlwind. It's going to catch up to you. And a good father will put up guardrails. It's good. It's right. And it's true for all people. So like, for instance, here in Deuteronomy, go to chapter 5, instantly he's going to give you the 10 Commandments. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's what I'm talking about. They're so oppressive. They're so repressive. Like they say stuff like, I'm the Lord your God. You shall not have any other gods before me. Verse 7, don't make an image. Verse 8. Verse 11, don't misuse the name of the Lord. Verse 12, observe the Sabbath. Verse 16, honor your father and mother. 17, don't murder. So these 10 commandments are, don't do it. They're guardrails. Don't do it. See how oppressive? So let me just ask you, so do you want, let's say you have a kid. Would you like your child to grow up and be an adulterer? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful if your child became a murderer? Wouldn't that be great? And they stole from everybody and they lied and nobody could tell them what to... See, it's good. Go to Deuteronomy 5, 22 and 33. Look what it says. So, actually, let's just go to 28, Deuteronomy 5. The Lord heard you when you spoke to me. This is what Moses said. And the Lord said to me, I've heard what this people said to you. Everything they said was good. Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always. Why? So that it might go well for them and their children forever. Boy, God is mean, isn't he? Obey me. Why? Because I want it to go good for you. Oh, he's such a meanie. Look at verse 30. Go tell them to return to their tents, but stay here with me so that I may give you all the commands. Talking to Moses. Decrees and laws you are to teach them to follow in the land I'm giving them to possess. Verse 32. So, be careful to do what the Lord your God has commanded you. Do not turn aside to the right or to the left. Don't go off the cliff. Don't drive off the edge of muerte. Very bad. Verse 33, walk in obedience to all that the Lord your God has commanded you, so that, there it is again, intent, you may live and prosper and prolong your days in the land that you will possess. See, Star Trek stole that. Live long and prosper. God was, what Vulcan before Spock was. So, he wants you to live long and prosper. So, let's kind of break this down practically. Because God does say the law is good, but in our hearts we're still, I don't know. Let's just be very practical if we can, because this debate is raging everywhere. This debate about law and goodness of law isn't just about God, but it's about society. It's about schools, it's about churches, and it's about homes. So let's talk about, is law and order necessary? And let's bring it down to inside your house, open your door, and see what's going on. What do you do? What do you do when you have a kid who's having a temper tantrum? When you have a difficult child? Do you discipline them, spank them, or give them a timeout? That's so mean. No, no, no. Do you tell them, I'm the parent, you got to do what I say? Stop it. Do you do? No, you got to give them autonomy, which is this new kind of teaching called the Gentle Parenting book. Since 2015, this lady named Sarah Ockwell Smith has been selling all kind of books about gentle parenting. And I'll kind of highlight what it teaches, but she is so popular. Look at all these books coming out. She's got one called Gentle Discipline. And look at the sweet little picture down there, so you know it's good. It's got that heart balloon. It's going to be good parenting. Look at this next one. I don't know who the author is, but it's got a guy with a man bun, so it's got to be good. It's got to be good. It's so cool. If it's cool, it's good, I remember it's about 15 years ago, my wife was sent this little video about making kale salad, and having kale salad is the best thing in the world. And they showed this family. It was a super cool family, and they're all laughing, eating kale salad, having a great time. And so she's like, I'm going to have kale salad for our kids. So she made kale salad for my kids. And my two sons go, Mom, what is this? This is like eating sawdust. This is terrible. But we think it was so cool on a video, it's got to work. That guy's got a man bun. This has got to work, doesn't it? And then they got a third one. Nice title. How to be a calm parent. Have you ever had kids? Come on. Oh, come on. How to be a calm parent. Oh, man. Sounds so nice. So this is called gentle parenting, and there's 3 priorities in gentle parenting. Listen closely, because people are buying this hook, line, and sinker. Number 1, as a parent, you need to prioritize connection, empathy, respect, and validation with positive discipline, which emphasizes you want to meet the children's emotional needs before everything. Number 1. Number 2, encourage problem solving. So involve them in problem solving discussions. Help them think through the consequences of their action and come up with solutions. One of the cool solutions is, no, don't use time out, use time in. And what time in is, instead of isolating your child in time out, use time in by sitting with them and discussing their behavior and their emotional state. See? And then the third thing is offer them choices. Give your child choices to empower them to be them. For instance, instead of demanding they eat their vegetables, ask them if they'd like carrots or broccoli. Have you ever been a parent? Anyhow, so let's just kind of give two examples. They give two examples how this works. Tell me if this works. Tell me if this would work for you. Tantrum in the grocery store. So let's say you're going down the candy aisle and the kid grabs some Twizzlers and starts eating it like that. A kid like that. Here's what they say. Instead of yelling or resorting to threats, first, get down to your child's eye level. So get down to your child's eye level. Oh, they're eating that and the red is going down. Get down to their eye level and say, I see you're really upset because you really wanted that candy. Validate emotions, then explain. That candy bar does look indeed delicious. That Twizzler looks great. Then offer them an explanation why the candy can't be bought and suggest alternative choices. Unfortunately, this candy bar is full of bad stuff and a lot of sugar, which would not be good for you. Would you like to pick an apple or banana instead? Have you ever been a parent? Sugar? I want more of that. Wouldn't you like a banana or some broccoli? You want to get a kid to not respect you forever? Do that to your kids. Now let's just extrapolate the scenario a little bit. Let's say a guy is wanting to commit adultery and God says, I understand your feelings. I understand that woman looks beautiful. I don't think that would be a good idea. Let's give you some alternative choices. You have a wife. Oh, this is ridiculous. What is going on? What's happening is they forgot inside of us we're desperately broken. And sometimes our sin lies to us and can justify anything. Here's another one. It's called the bedtime battle. Bedtime battle is establishing a calming bedtime routine that allows your child to wind down. Say to them, I understand that you don't want this great day to end quite yet, and that you'd love to keep on playing all night. No kidding. I don't understand. But if you do that, Johnny, you will be really tired and grumpy tomorrow. Give them choices within the boundaries. Do you want to read 2 books or 1 tonight? Also validate their need for comfort. I know you might be feeling scared of the dark. I used to feel like that as well when I was your age. I'm here for you if you need me. Do you think that works? What we would tell our boys is, if you don't go to bed, you guys realize there's a monster outside. It worked like a charm. They're still scared of a couple of them. My daughter Ginger, I would tell her stories. I did. I purpose you do have to balance this with love. But I would give her 45 minutes. I gave her 45 minutes. I'd tell her a new story every night, but she would always want more. For 45 minutes, tell me another one. And then I'd leave the room. She goes, I want another one. If you keep whining like that, I'm going to slam this door and you're not going to get up. You're not going to get one for weeks, months. Just be quiet and go to bed. There's a point where you are dad or mom. There's a point where God is God. And He has every right to tell you no. Every right. And if you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm saying. Well, this pediatrician was getting very frustrated because everybody he sees has been reading this book. He's more in a swanky part of town. So he wrote his own book. It's called The Collapse of Parenting. It's honestly, he said this kind of parenting actually has been going on for a while because you want self-esteem. You don't want to hurt your kid's psyche. And now they're getting old enough where they're researching these kids. There's never been more anxiety. There's never been more overweight problems. There's never been more drugs issued in the last 20 years than ever before. And he says a lot of it goes to this permissive parenting, which another way to say is gentle parenting. So he wrote this book, The Collapse of Parenting, and it's actually a positive book. He says these quotes, and listen to some of these quotes. They're powerful, and they're right. The child expects, actually been designed to look up to the parent. to be instructed by the parent. Indeed, to be, it's a weird word, commanded by the parent. If the parent instead serves the child, then the relationship falls out of its natural balance. As a consequence, you may not earn your child's love at all. That's the bizarre thing. You want them to respect you and be buddies with you, but when you do that, you are actually making them the authority. And when your kids become authority over you, they have no respect for you. Sometimes you got to draw the line and said, if you cross it, there's going to be something to pay. They need to know if you are actually telling the truth. Listen to this quote. The job of the parent is to teach, probably to me one of the greatest gifts of the Holy Spirit ever, self-control. Have you ever seen children that have been born from fetal alcohol syndrome? A lot of them don't have self-control. It's a nightmare. Self-control is a gift, one of the greatest gifts the Spirit could ever give. The job of the parent is to teach self-control, to explain what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, meaning you as parents have the right to dictate that. Why? Because you love them, and you have been around long enough to know what's over the cliff, to establish boundaries and to enforce consequences. But listen to this last quote. So somebody said, he said this, he's talking, I saw an interview with this author, and he said, if I meet a 15-year-old, I can tell if they're going to be successful at the age of 24, 34, and 44 by one trait. And if they have this one trait, they're going to have a marvelous life. And here it is. The best predictor of success for a 15-year-old is humility. Ooh. What is humility? Humility knows I am dust and I'm not that great. I'm not that great. Here's the problem with self-esteem. With kids that are raised with self-esteem and they get whatever they want, when they go to their first job and the boss gets mad at them, they're going to crumble and quit. And it's terrible. I've even heard people, I remember I was in youth group, where some parents will so shelter their kids, if a kid hears a swear word, like the S word, or if they hear the F word once in their life, it's like, oh no, it's the end of the world. We're here, according to Psalm 112, to make strong children, leaders. And you do that by being strong parents with love. So, in conclusion, here's all I want to say. Laws, boundaries, punishments, saying no are good for all of us. And God's law is good for all of us because God knows that evil dwells within. He knows there's cliffs. He wants to provide avenues that free us up to live without any regrets. Look what David says about the law. Your laws endure to this day, for all things serve you. What he means by this is law is derived from God's character. Because it's from God's character, it will persevere. It will be sustained. It's eternal. There's a heaviness to it. If your law had not been my delight, I would have perished. I will never forget your precepts, for by them you've preserved my life. The law is good. So our first walk up the mountain is simply that. The law is good. Next week we're going to talk about, by climbing, do I get to heaven? Do I get to reach? Will it save me? And that may be the most important message we can talk about.